Welcome back to War Thunder and welcome to the third iteration of the pre-closed beta ship testing here in War Thunder. And I played a few days before I actually could, make a video out of it. And first of all, I'm sorry for the lack of content the last few days. I had some real life issues and massive sound issues with my microphone. I don't know what happened. I actually have no idea how I solved it. I just tried around for so long up until the sound quality was alright again. So yeah, the next few days will also bring some tank reviews with it, and so probably the normal schedule, which I actually don't have, will resume. And so I think we have to talk about this iteration. Now, before I begin to talk about the ships and so on, I want to let you know everything that I want to talk about in the video, so to speak. First of all, I want to present you all of our ships. I want to present you the new game mode, the new map, some tactics, tips and tricks, and some problems that I had with it, and also some tips and tricks that I figured out. The dominance of aircraft will be kind of a topic, but it's not against player ships. It's more against the UI, which I also have to talk about, and so on. And there is actually a lot to talk about, so I hope you bear with me. And I have actually no idea how long it will take to run through all the facts that I want to talk about. But I think a few arguments I can cut out right here. I think it is... I asked for some weather effects, and while the weather is still clear and nice, the waves that are, the factor, I think, in this kind of iteration of the test. Your ship constantly rolled and jumped up in the air, dove down actually under the waterline when you were in a wave valley, so you were not underwater, but the enemy couldn't shoot at you, and so you couldn't sometimes not shoot at the enemy because he was under the waterline, so to speak, from your perspective. It was kind of, this was the main factor that I had to deal with. I came up with some solution that worked in practice, but I can't point my finger on it where it is really at that it worked out. Then I think now let's begin with the four ships, and this time we begin to talk about the Soviet ones. The first ship that I want to talk about is the Project 183 Bolshevik, which is a rank 4 battle rating 5.7 ship, and it is the Soviet entry ship, so to speak. Here you can see the stat card, and everything is subject to change in this test, so it's just a raw indication, more or less, what we will see in game in terms of battle rating, rank, and how it all plays together, so keep that in mind. But the Project 183 is equipped with two dual 25mm 2M3 mountings or guns with a lot of ammunition, 3,120 rounds in total, and 533 torpedo tubes, two of them with 53 38 torpedoes, and they are off a bit to the side, so like on the American boats that we saw in previous iterations. Furthermore, we have 12 BB1 depth charges. We have a little bit of armor on the main fire tower, but not too much, to be honest. And with 74 kilometers an hour, it's the second fastest ship in this test, but it's highly maneuverable, highly likely to accelerate and deaccelerate very rapidly, because it just has 66.5 tons. And yeah, we also have the fact that this is a very nimble ship, and it is very good for the attacking role, I think. One of the turrets is in the front and one is in the back, and the gunners are more or less a little bit more open than on certain German ships. However, they seem to survive a bit longer, and it takes a while up until the point where you take out this ship. Furthermore, I was never ammo racked in this ship, so yeah, despite having a lot of high explosive stuff on the side of the ship, I never got ammo racked. But it could be a statistical oddity, or I was just very lucky. This ship is again very good for assault operations, and especially in wolf packs. The 25mm do good damage, but you don't have the rate of fire of the 20mm of the Germans in particular. And yeah, so also the mountings, you just have 2 of them, so when one gets knocked out you are down 50% of your firepower. But the one thing is, you have more shells in your belt or magazine, whatever you want to call it, so you have a higher, time of firing before you went into the reload, which is not longer, in my opinion, than for the 20mm, which is the thing that cripples the S100 for me. But overall, this was not really the ship that I was looking for. I have to say, I obviously wanted to try out the big boats. However, how does it work? So how do you get to the next ship? Well, I think this is the part where I have to talk about this. First of all, you have 3 vehicles as options, and this ship, the Project 183 Bolshevik, was the entry ship for the Soviet section. And by the way, we just had Germans versus Soviets in this 3rd iteration. You picked it and you went out and you killed the enemy, crippled them, and then tried to gather enough spawn points, at least 500 of them, to get into the bigger Soviet ship, which was the MPK Pr122 BIS. About more of this ship in a moment. And yeah, so you needed to gather a lot of spawn points while this ship remained free in terms of spawn points, so you could technically respawn infinitely often in this ship. It is kind of fun, and it was kind of very nice to maneuver around on a battlefield with it. And while it is technically not the fastest, it was certainly the one that had the highest speed on the battlefield when your opponents and you began to turn. And especially when you went into the enemy with some wolf packs with it was just performing very well. But again, the depth charges are not really what was kind of this trademark of this iteration. There were very few moments where you actually were so close to the enemy that you could use them. I actually never damaged or sank an enemy by using depth charges. Unlike the torpedoes, they were really long range. Sometimes they just randomly disappeared, both the Soviet and the German ones. And you could fire them at the cargo ships, which was kind of the goal of this iteration. So we saw the new Convoy system on this new map, which is called Ice Fields, and that actually describes perfectly the design of this map. So a little bit about the map design before we switch to the next ship, and that is that you had some icebergs and some ice plates, so to speak, in the middle of the map, most likely, and you had parallel going convoys of AI controlled cargo ships and some escort ships. So yeah, and the goal was to actually kill those cargo ships and the escort ships as well. And this is the part where the dominance of aircraft come into play. I will talk about this in a moment. However, it was not very wise to go in the beginning for them, and the spawn points were within the convoy, so it is kind of difficult to go for the enemy spawn points in the first place, and you actually just had cover in the middle of the map. However, the icebergs and ice fields were arranged in that way that it was highly suicidal to trying to get to the other side of the map, because they split the map in two partially. It was kind of dancing around the gaps and throwing torpedoes into there as long range maybe weapons. You could aim them at the convoy ships, which brought me some surprising kills and so on. So we'll talk about this in a moment, because it is in this test that defensive playing is so much more rewarding than offensive playing, and you just cut the enemies up on and on and on when they try to advance. Also because of the damage model, a few shells were enough to actually cripple an enemy when you hit them in the right place, which was difficult because of the waves. So aiming was very difficult in the first place, as you could see in the background footage. So the next ship that I want to talk about is the MPK Pr122 BIS, which is a rank 4 battle rating 6.7 ship. And again, everything is subject to change. Now let's talk a little bit about the armament. We have an 85mm 90K cannon in the front with 230 rounds, and before you spawn in you actually can switch between high explosive shells and armor piercing shells, but sadly not in the game itself. So yeah, then I would highly advise you to go with the full ammunition load for all guns. And we have also two 37mm cannons, 70K cannons with 2000 rounds in total, mounted in the back of the ship, and they have a nice rate of fire together. Then we also have three dual 12.7mm disc machine guns, and also 22 BB1 depth charges. You will see more of them in a moment. Furthermore, with 40 kilometers an hour, it's not the fastest ship, it's actually I think the slowest. But furthermore, it has just a displacement, or it has a displacement of 336 tons, which is quite heavy. It feels quite sluggish, and yeah, it is kind of, it trades all its maneuverability to firepower. I have to say this ship is, well, let's put it that way. You have all the firepower, the effective firepower for long-range engagements mounted in the nose, and because of this artificial aiming assistant that you have, you can point your nose towards the enemy and can pull off very precise shots. And the gun handling overall is really nice. The problem for the 37s is that they are more for close range or mid-range engagements to keep up the rate of fire, and they can taken out and then the gunners don't get replaced, so every damage to those guns seems to stick up until the point that you die. Yeah, and the 12.7s are not very useful, but you know, you can try to mow down the deck crew, so to speak, but for structural damage they don't do enough. It's up to the 37s. The 85mm is really nice. Now you can see my try with the depth charges. You see them? They are in hedgehog launchers in the front, and I tried to loop it over, but they seem to have a range of just around about 100 meters or a few dozen meters. But first you have to launch all the depth charges from the rear, and also there is one depth charge mounted to the side, just one of them to each side. But then you have like 6 depth charges going over the front, so you can try to use them kind of like mortars. And here you can see how I bow tank. I angle the ship heavily and I just splash the enemy with the 85mm high explosive shells, as you can see in the top right corner kill cam. I have to say I like this ship, and for close quarters attack brawling action it is better suited than the German one, which I will talk about later. And as you can see, I really do a lot of damage. The problem is with the 85 you have the rate of fire, but you can't aim that precisely that you actually hit the guns. But you can see I absolutely dominate the enemy one, and I go also defensively. Now I crippled him so heavily that I in a moment will switch target to the other MPK Pr122 BIS, because you know it's easier to cripple the enemy to the point that they can't return fire, which is, you know, that what you want when they go for you. So when you have two opponents, try to cripple them both, so up until the point that they don't shoot back. At the moment you can see both my 37s are already taken out, which I miss at the moment, and I surprisingly got a kill on an S100. That is the one that I crippled before, and it seems like he bailed out. So killing somebody with that is not that easy, to be honest. The one criticism that I have is that at the moment I tried to hit all the sections and make them black, but you can see the high explosive shells actually penetrate the ship because they have a certain fuse delay, and they splash down the crew, which is good, and they damage a lot of modules, but they do not really triple like the section itself, so you have to make them black, but you see that most of the time they stayed red. Now overall, when you have the 37s remaining, that was a nasty boat. that was a nasty hit, because I actually hit the bottom of the ship while it was in mid-air, you know, jumping over a wave, and I hit the bottom, and you could see how drastically it splashes. That seems to be a PR183, so the Soviet beginner boat. And those small boats like the S100 and the PR or the PR183, the Project 183 Bolshevik that I presented you earlier, they are highly vulnerable to those relatively big high explosive shells. And there you can see how I aim with the nose and how precise my shots are actually going with the 85. And I use nothing but the 85 because the machine guns just don't justify, you know, going full broadside. Now I go a little bit broadside, but I still try to do the maximum damage with the big gun. Now you can see that somebody is in front of me, so I can't aim, and I actually try to go full reverse. But when you got hit a few times, it seems like it also affects your acceleration. But now it seems like I'm free again from my teammate, and I go for the shots again. And this is the part where you can see how the rolling of the ships actually affects the aiming. And in this respect, the Soviets have so much better gun handling than the Germans, because they seem to not be affected that much by the rolling in terms of aiming, as we will see later on with the S100 and the MZ1, where that is the factor that you have to deal the most with. So I think that's enough presenting of the Soviet one. Let's move on to the Germans. And at first I want to talk about the S100, which is a rank 2 battle rating 3.0 German boat, and it is not the first time that we see it. I think with the second iteration we saw this boat already in War Thunder. And let's talk about the armament, because that is the part where this, you know, ship seems to be superior to its Russian counterpart, the Bolshevik, but in fact it isn't. But it is better in defensive operations as it is in offensive operations, and I want to talk about you through why is that. First of all, let's talk about the armament. We have a quadruple 20mm MGC-38 cannon mounting in the back of the ship. Then in the middle we have a 20mm Flak-Zwilling MGC-38 mounting. And also we have one single 20mm MGC-38 cannon in the front. Furthermore, we have two 7.92mm machine guns, but they are more or less useless. They have a low caliber, not a, you know, they just are single ones, and they have very limited firing arcs. But we have the well-known 533mm G7A torpedoes, and they get launched from the front, and they run very parallel. And you can launch them individually, like every torpedo, but there is a little trick by how. And we also have 6 WBD depth charges. Now with 79 kilometers an hour, it is the fastest ship, but it is more or less always like running under 50 kilometers an hour, because it loses a lot of speed in the turn, and it takes ages to turn this ship. So in this respect, the Russian Bolshevik is superior in this respect, as it is just simply more maneuverable and can keep the speed in turns better. Then also with 117 tons, it is significantly faster, nearly double as heavy as in terms of displacement as the Bolshevik. But we have a little bit of citadel armor, but it's not really that much armor. Now, how does this armament perform? Well, the torpedoes are your long-range strike weapon, where you can fire them parallelly and with some time between, or two at once. But, you know, one single torpedo is mostly enough to take out your opponent. Furthermore, the firepower is very bad. First of all, the front single 20mm doesn't have enough firepower, and the middle one and the rear one have limited firing arcs towards the front, but they can freely kind of fire when facing backwards, except the middle one, which also has kind of a gap in the firing solution where it can fire freely, where the quadruple one is mounted, but that's kind of obvious. The thing is, you're limited to your kind of to a single belt for all cannons except the machine guns, but not worth talking about. And that is half armor piercing incendiary and half high explosive fragmentation. And that is a wonderful kind of mixture if for nearly all opponents, enemy S100s and also the Bolshevik. So when you hammer those 20 millimeters in quick succession, you can do tremendous amounts of damage when you bring all your guns to bear. Here you can see I tried to fire a little bit off. Now the problem is when you advance, you can't give the broadside to your opponent up until the point where you present a nice broadside, but then you can engage the enemy with your full firepower. But the tip is practically this: you aim for the gaps in the ice fields, release your torpedoes, and then you turn and wait until somebody shows himself in the gap, and then you engage him when you kind of turn already away. That gives you enough time to reload your torpedoes, gives you enough time to disengage when the enemy is focusing you, and you also are safe from mostly enemy torps as you have longer reaction times to them. In World of Warships, it's always a good idea to turn into your enemy, into the direction where the torpedoes are coming from, and there you can see I just got a kill on a cargo ship with the torpedoes, so they have quite a distance where they can go. Sometimes they disappear randomly, but now the thing is this: the problem with those 20 millimeters is they have a good belt, that is very good especially against lightly armored vehicles. For the heavier ones like the MZ1 or the MPK, they are not really that great against the hull, but they are really great against mowing down the crew if you hit, and that is the difficult part. To aim those guns, the S100 jumps and rolls like crazy, so you actually don't have too much time aiming at your opponent, and then your guns are most effective at short ranges. Then you have to kind of keep your guns on target. That is not easy and makes you a sitting duck. And then the rate or the time that you have available for shooting at the enemy is very limited, because there are just like 20 rounds in each belt, and the reload rates are insanely long and so frustrating, because at this time you're completely defensiveless and all your armament is the same. And that is where the advantage of the Bolshevik really is. It can keep up the rate of fire. Yes, it has to reload as well. The reload rate is roughly the same, but it has so much more shells available. Here you can see I tried to aim for the rear of this subchaser, trying to make the last segment black, which is normally how you kill your enemies with your 20 millimeters. But as we can see, it's not the very best. Furthermore, I have to talk about how this ship can take damage. I have to say, not very well. First of all, when one of your loaders gets taken out, the reload rates, for example, for the rear gun are insanely high and even longer. And when your gunner on the middle gun, for the Flakzwilling, for the dual 20 millimeters gets taken out, he doesn't get, filled up, or another crew member doesn't replace him. So then that gun is taken out for the rest of the match that you're in this specific ship. And the front gun is your major damage dealer, but because he has not a lot of gun depression, most of the time you have nothing going for you. Now here you can see I am still at my half, but the enemy team has broken through, to be honest, and so I am dealing with this MZ1, which is the German big boat, so to speak, and you can see how few damage I deal to this guy, because I just have the front gun available. I try a frontal assault with the torpedoes, but then I receive a massive smack to the face. Must have been the 88 with some high explosive shells. And you can see I have repair time. The front section of my ship is black, and also I have my steering and aiming chief getting away here. Somehow my torpedoes disappeared, but I still have the rear 20mm available, and he still can't fire. So yeah, I tried to deal a bit of damage to the enemy, but I can't. So there is not too much I can do, and more parts of my ship get blackened, and then I got knocked out from the rear. The last ship in this presentation is the MZ1, the Mehrzweckboot, or in English the multi-purpose ship boat. It is currently a rank 4 battle rating 6.0 ship, and it has some mighty punch at its disposal in form of two 88mm SKC-35 cannons with 440 high explosive rounds. You don't have the option of going AP, unlike on the Soviet one. It is also equipped with a single 37mm flak M42 with 2000 rounds mounted as well in the front. One of the 88s is in the front, one in the back. Also, we have one quadruple 20mm MGC-38, which is practically the same as on the S100 on the back. This is also mounted in the back, but we also have additional three 20mm MGC-38 mountings, and we furthermore have two 533mm G7A torpedoes, which are the same as on the S100, like the WBD depth charges, which we have 6 of. So you practically have the same armament as the S100, but flavored with 37mm and 288s. But you are therefore also significantly slower with just 52 km an hour, which also takes a while to accelerate too. Then we have also with 375 tons, one of the heaviest ships in this comparison, being nearly 40 tons heavier than its current Russian counterpart. And as you can see, those 88s do tremendous amounts of damage when you hit with them. Then the next thing is this ship can just dish out the punishment, but it's not that great in, you know, taking it, but it is better than the S100 by far. And you could see I just smacked this PR183 massively. You can see here in the hit cam in the top right corner the massive damage output from this 88s, and yeah, this was just a second kill in quick succession. Now I have a bit of a derp moment here, getting myself kind of stuck in this thing. You can see it's very unmaneuverable, very slow. The acceleration is not the best, but overall I like this ship. Now let's talk about the torpedoes. They are Amorex, and I got most of the time when I got killed, I got one-shotted by somebody just, you know, having a lucky hit on those torpedo tubes. They are kind of in the inside of the ship, but everything seems to go through, as the ship has no armor except on the main fire tower. Like the S100, it excels in defensive role combat, and is not that great in frontal attacks. Especially the frontal 88 has some awkwardly bad aiming properties through the or from the front. And now let's have a look at this Russian counterpart. Oh, look at this, how I smacked this guy with the 88s, and also how difficult it is to get guns on target with the rolling of the ship. And that one was one of the better engagements. Now he was so crippled and focusing on other ships that I took no damage from him, so that was practically some target practicing. Now there is another MPK Pr122, and I immediately engage him. He seems to have taken some damage previously, and he shows just the bow, but it's not a problem. I have so much firepower. Now, against planes, this ship is very disastrous due to all the 20mm, the 37 and the twin 88s. I killed numerous planes, but I didn't record it. So yeah, I mean, when you hit a plane with those 88, which is, you know, based off a anti-aircraft gun, I guess, I mean, it has the name, you know, 88. It's literally designed for that. Now you could see the look in the inside of the ship. This ship is not easy to make work. It excels at rather long to mid-range engagements, is not that great in close quarters, although when you get guns on target, you really can punish your enemy. I like this ship actually so much that I played most of the time with it, because it was just simply the best multi-purpose boat in this respect. And I mostly actually forgot about using the torpedoes, and again the depth charges were not that great. Now I smacked here another S100 with the 88, so the guns really pack a mighty punch. I said it very often, but it is actually the trick to get trying to make work or short work of the enemy by using the 88s and giving the 88s the priority in terms of aiming. Now you could see how those green circles and those red circles just swing around up and down. So the big ones are obviously for the 88s, and you need to make the 88s count. You could see here I mostly stayed on my side of the map, and I had a close look at the minimap, because the minimap was such a good indicator where the enemy is and which one has a line of fire towards me. And so, to stay with your team but trying to support them from a further back, that was the thing. Now I have to say here one thing, talking about more the gameplay and the map design so often. As you can see here in the minimap, the ice fields and icebergs are mostly, arranged in the middle of the map, where, they make it more like, where the passages through them are very narrow. There are a natural torpedo magnet. The fire of the other enemy's team seems to be concentrated there, so if you run through, you get focused down. And yeah, I tried here some long-range shooting on those cargo ships, but I have to say one thing about the cargo ships. You might expect, to be able to deal damage to them with the big guns, the 88s or the 85 for the Russians, but you actually can't, because you're bound to HE on the 88, and also the normal guns or the 85. You should prioritize using HE and not AP for two things. First of all, HE deals damage to all ships except the cargo ships, but with using armor-piercing high explosive shells, for example the Russian MPK boat, you overpenetrate. So according to the penetration and fuse sensitivity stats, the cargo ships seem to have side platings somewhere between 11 and 14 millimeters thick, because you can't penetrate them with the 10 millimeters of high explosive penetration on the 88 high explosive, but you over penetrate with the 85 millimeter armor piercing high explosive shell, so which has a fuse sensitivity of 15 millimeters. So somewhere between there. Also, if you get close to the enemy, if you get too close to the enemy convoy, the AI units will also focus you or shoot at you with the autocannons they have, and then they cripple you too much before you can significant amounts of damage towards them. And it was very difficult to go near them in the first place, because within the enemy convoy and their escort ships, there were the spawn points of the enemy team. So when you have actually cleared your way out of them, you had a lot of problems dealing with the fresh reinforcements, and they also had spawn protection for a long time. And in the same way, you excelled at throwing back the enemy's advance when you actually had the MZ1 and the enemy had an advantage. I had a battle where I smacked them hard for that, and I think you can see here why. Now those Russian ships are coming through the gap, and I'm focusing them, and I punished them hard for doing so, as you could see. And again, a massive dual 88 hit in the front, to the front of this MPK, which is the counterpart to mine, and I hit him so hard. Now, how do the 88 work? The high explosive damage actually, deals great damage to the little ships, obviously. But how does it go to work against the MPK? Well, it penetrates the armor and explodes in the inside, destroying multiple, not just mowing down kind of the crew in the inside, which is good, but it fails to really damage hard the compartment. It damages the modules, of course, and it actually can ammo rack the enemy torpedo tubes if they have some, which the MPK doesn't have. But, you know, enemy MZ1s, I one-shotted them numerous times. And you could see I completely crippled them, and I again give priority to my 88s to trying to smack the enemy with that. And again, I punished this MPK hard. And now you can see me how I circle around this gap, expecting to deal with some enemies. And look how much damage I do with the 88s to this rather patriotic PR123. Yeah, he takes a lot of this. Now I switch the fire to the MZ1 and watch that shot. Ammo rack! Boom! Twin 88mm high explosive shell to the torpedo tubes, which instantly blew up his ship. And now I cripple this MPK PR122 again, and I just open up with everything that I have, and again prioritize on using the 88s. And there you can see how difficult it is with rolling. And I receive a single hit and it sets me on fire. And I punish the Bolshevik hard for it. Now you can see that the frontal 88mm turret has a rather long turret traverse speed. The rear mounted one actually rotates like a 20mm one. I'm not sure if this is a bug, but we will see. However, the gun handling overall is rather nice when you are kind of retreating and showing more or less the back of the ship towards the enemy, or the rear. Now at this moment it calmed down a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about planes. And this is where we talk a little bit about the objective as well. Now again, I talked about the cargo ships that you could see in the background right now, which are escorted by some escort ships, AI unit controlled, and your goal is to kill them. But it is very difficult to go through the enemy's defenses, and again the spawn points of the enemy team players are also there within the convoy. So it is actually the job of the plane. Here is my tip for playing the planes. Load big bombs, 500 kilo or bigger. Like with the Heinkel 111 you have twin 1000 kilo bombs, which are highly effective. And the tip is just to go and climb. That was some nice hedgehog action right there, but it didn't help the MPK. But back to planes. You climb to between 1000 and 1500 and 2000 meters, and then you go parallel or anti-parallel to the convoy and drop 1000 kilogram bombs on that ships. Here is my tip: focus on the cargo ships. Again, an ammo rack on the one torpedo. Then I also have to say that you drop them and giving lead like one ship length or something like that, and you will hit from 2000 meters smack on the center of the cargo ship, instantly blowing it up. And that is so much easier as trying to get through with your ships, which then get focused down by the enemy reinforcements. Here you can see this ship actually, you know, jumping up and down within the waves, and sometimes seem to go underwater from my perspective, or flying in the air. And so planes can easily dictate the outcome of the battle, and when you fly high enough you also are outright out of the firing arcs of the ships, and so you're untouchable. At the moment there are no fighters to counter you, so this is practically the time to, how to say it, to spade your IL-4s or your Heinkel 111s if you haven't spaded them at all. Don't use the torpedoes, because then you have to fly low and slow. Remember the release speed of torpedoes? I made a video about it. That is kind of the neck-breaking part, to be honest. And yeah, so planes can dominate it, which is a shame. I like, again, the combined arms factor, but Gaijin has to polish it a little bit in this respect. And I take down another PR183. And again, you can see me how I screen here alongside the gaps and just focus the ships that come through. And I also focus on the ones that shoot me or that are closest. And again, a tactical factor is sometimes, I mentioned that before probably, try to disable the enemy's ability to fire back, to return fire, mow down the gun crews and so on, or try to ammo rack them. But again, that is very situational and limited to those ships that are that have torpedoes and where the torpedo ammo racks actually blow up as well. Sadly, slowing down doesn't really give you a kind of stability factor, alternating the speed is not so good. It seems like I have a strong suspicion that there is a direction the waves go to, and if you align your ship rightly in the direction in comparison to the waves, then your ship seems to not roll that much, but that direction often changed from match to match, so I'm not quite sure. And here I beached myself. That was tactical beaching, obviously, and you can see how I worked over this MPK as well. And that was the final blow, so to speak. For sure I would have gotten the kill on that. So that is practically my showcasing of the third iteration of the test. In like 1.5 hours there is the next test, and then I hope that I will get some more gameplay out of it. So that's it for today. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Let me know in the comment section your opinions about this test. Everybody that I asked so far, especially in chat while the matches, liked it. What is your opinion, and what should change, what should remain? Let me know in the comment section. Anyways, give this video a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, and we will see each other on the waves of War Thunder.